Hello friends, so today we are going to talk about AK upgrades, and we're going to talk a little bit about why I felt it necessary to do an AK update video. So I've got this Palmetto State Armory AK-P here to review. I've been shooting this thing when I can. Ammo has been readily available for this gun, and that's awesome. I've spent a lot of time with it. I'm almost ready to do the review. That will probably come in the next month. But when I switched from the AR to the AK, because I can't give 5.56, I started to realize, all the AK folks who act as though this platform is just as good as the AR-15, they're fucking dreaming. That is just not the case. And the PSA AK has some serious quality of life improvements that a standard AK doesn't. So I think it's really important to start out with the upgrades and walk you through what I did, because some of these I made very early in this process. A few of these things I added after the very first range trip. I shot the gun and said, man, we gotta do something about that. So let's start with the sights. The sights on these AKSU style guns, they suck. We all know that. I think even the AK people would probably readily admit that. So what Palmetto State Armory has done is they've added this top rail. This is really off of the AKV. It's hinged just like you would expect, and it locks down at the back. It is different though in the sense that it has zero side-to-side play. Some of the AKs, the standard AKs with the hinge that I've seen, the shorter ones, there is some side-to-side play. But this one does have vertical play despite what PSA tells you. I don't know if you can see that, but that's moving around. We'll talk about that in the actual review. So that does impact the zero, and the further back your optic is, the more it impacts the zero. So it does affect your zero vertically. But whenever the bolt comes back, it pops that back up into place where it needs to be. So the way this presents itself practically, let's say you bump the top cover. When you go and fire that first shot, the vertical zero might be off, but when the bolt cycles, it's going to pop that cover back up where it needs to be, and then your subsequent shots, assuming that you do not bump the top cover again, will be where you want them to be. So I don't know if this is a good final solution because there's no side rail, and I would have much rather, stuck an RS regulate side mount on there and put it on that way. But yeah, this is what we have, and I wanted to give it a shot and see if this was a solution. I think it's half-baked, but it's a good idea, but it's not working that well. If you move the optic up, then there's going to be less play, because if you think about it, there's more distance for it to move top to bottom at the rear than there is at the front. But MROs don't like being far up. I've been mounting them this way forever, and they work a lot better further back. All right, so we know why we put the MRO on there, because these sights blow, and we needed something back there in order to be able to shoot the gun effectively, especially past a certain distance, right? So why did I choose the MRO specifically? Well, of the micro optics, the MRO has the widest field of view. It almost feels, when it's far back, like you're not using a micro optic. It gives you the impression of a much larger device, and I really like that. That's awesome. It weighs almost nothing. It doesn't get in the way. It's got a great battery life. It's an outstanding optic. It has some issues, though, in certain circumstances. Like I said, if you move it further forward, some of that distortion around the edge of the super wide lens does become an issue, and it just kind of looks really funny. But back here, man, this thing is the best micro option. It's amazing. But if you're planning to mount the optic way forward, I don't know, something else might work a little bit better for you. You might want to go with an aim point in that case. So down here in the control area, some serious quality of life improvements. The magazine releases stock, although I did a little bit of filing work to it. It wouldn't release magazines for some reason. It just wouldn't let them go. But that was able to be fixed with a little bit of file work. I changed the grip from a Magpul Mo to the Magpul K2. I love this grip angle. It's amazing. I love the texturing on it. It doesn't sort of tilt your wrist at that really extreme angle that's just really uncomfortable. I hate the way that feels. So this is an excellent upgrade. I highly recommend it. PSA, when my gun went back for servicing, they installed this fancy Krebs style safety. This is also essential. It lets you work the safety with your finger. One of my biggest complaints with the AK was that you can't just flip the safety on and off as you're, I don't know, moving from cover or whatever. This makes the gun a lot safer to use, in my opinion, especially with a light trigger like this ALG. This feels great. It's nice and snappy and easy to manipulate. That's an essential upgrade. This I've had from the second range session on. Highly recommended. I would really not enjoy this gun nearly as much without this one small thing. And a lot of different manufacturers make this kind of thing now. So whichever one is your preference, go and pick one up and install it in your AK. So I mentioned that the gun had to go back to the factory. Why is that? Well, the op rod was bent. And I don't mean it was a little bent. The op rod was extremely bent. It looked like it had some sort of erectile dysfunction. It seemed to work okay, but I didn't want the gun to be tested that way long term. And, you know, they took the gun back and they fixed it, but it's one of those things where I was looking at it like, holy shit, how did this leave the factory that way? It was crazy bent. Just really extreme. It would be tough to not notice that. And again, I'm not knocking PSA here. I like them very much. They're local, but at the same time, good Lord, how did they not catch that? All right, so last of all, in the control area, we have this ALG trigger. I love this trigger. I love everything that ALG and Geisley puts out for the most part, with with a few exceptions. This thing feels amazing. You want to take a look at how it feels? Yeah, me too. Let's look at it. All right, so they say it's a single stage. Yeah, okay, it's kind of a single stage, I guess. It really has a rolling break. So yeah, there's no movement, but then all that back and back and back, and then it breaks. One more time. Back and back and back. And it's really light. It's like 2.5, 3 pounds. It is super, super light. Let's look at the reset. Yeah, that's really nice. That trigger made this gun much faster to shoot. And by the way, the stock trigger was excellent as well. It had also kind of a rolling break, but I don't know, it was maybe 6 pounds, 5 pounds, and there was a lot more slop in it. Again, not a bad trigger at all. It was really good, but this is in a completely different league. This is exceptional. And God, they're like $60. Really great. I can't recommend that highly enough. If you have an AK and you don't have one of these, and you don't mind a 3-pound trigger or a little bit less, go pick that up. And they've got a little bonus spring that comes with it that increases the weight just a hair. Depending on your hammer spring and how much pressure it's putting on the trigger in there, it'd probably make it 4 pounds, I think. At the rear, we have a lovely SBA3 brace, a plum one. In my opinion, this is the best brace option. I think it's an excellent brace. It's the best brace on the market. Highly recommended. Now, this is not an upgrade, though. This came on the gun, but still, love that. All right, up front, perhaps the most drastic change that I made is the installation of this SLR handguard. I don't remember exactly what this one is called because their naming scheme is kind of baffling, and there's 50 different models with a ton of different designations. So whatever this is, I'll put it on the screen. That's what that is. But this is an absolutely amazing rail system. I love it. It's fantastic. I highly, highly recommend it. So what do I like about this? Well, there was the Magpul one on here originally, and it was bulky. It weighed more than this does, and it was plastic. I couldn't stand it. I hated it. It just made the gun feel really front heavy. It just tilted down. It was really, really unpleasant. This is excellent. You have sling mounting points. You have these rail spots. You have this awesome gas tube rail here. This is the way to go. I love this. It makes the gun handle so much better. It removes a ton of bulk from the front. I don't think it actually weighs that much less. I think it's maybe 2 or 3 ounces less, but the weight is distributed much differently. Far more pleasant. I consider this to be completely essential because it lets you mount accessories up front in much more useful ways. Like being able to put this mod light on the top rail and have it leaning out this far, that's just great. It's fantastic. And man, I've already marred up that mod light pretty good. It's just fantastic. This is the way to go. And you can see how bad the rear sight is here. It's just non-adjustable on all AKs of this size. Well, not all. I'm sure somebody has installed a different sight on some model here or there, but in a general sense, that's what you see. Another completely essential upgrade is some sort of muzzle device other than the booster. So the booster does a good job at boosting. It definitely increases recoil, that's for sure, while having just an insane amount of blast. So it's got a little chamber in there, and the gas kind of fills it up, and it drives the op rod harder. We don't need that with this system. This is not exactly an unreliable system, is it? And I'm not saying it had an extreme amount of recoil. That's not what I mean, but it had more recoil than 7.62x39 should. So I installed this JMac muzzle brake. This thing is awesome. So it has an insane amount of blast, as you'll see in some of the videos. It's just absolutely fucking crazy. And it throws this huge fireball to either side. But the booster was doing that too. So this way, I'm at least getting some compensation out of it for all that blast.
Gotta work on that.
And I have to say, this is the most effective brake I've ever used on any gun. The first time I fired it, I thought that I had a squib because the recoil was reduced, I don't know, 70%, 60%. I know that sounds like bullshit, but it's absolutely true. I had some other folks shoot the gun as well, and they said, holy shit, it feels like a different caliber almost. It feels like we're shooting 5.45 or something almost. It's not quite that much of a difference, but it's pretty huge. So I highly recommend this. And then I went with the mod light because mod lights are amazing lights. And every great home defense gun, well, it needs a light. So this is the OKW. It's got the really long throw, lots of candela, lots of throw, lower lumens, really great light. The Practical Tactical Minimalist recommended this to me, and as with all things light related, he was correct about this one. He always gets the light stuff dead on. Never been wrong about that one. So a quick preliminary review of the AK-P, because I know y'all been waiting on this, but there's just so much to cover. This one has taken a while, and I don't want the final review to be 2 hours long, so we'll cover some stuff here. So I've got about 600 rounds through the gun at this point. We've had some reliability stuff. You know, the op rod was bent, and then there were some times when the bolt felt kind of sluggish, and it failed to completely chamber around one time. Other than that, there have been no problems, but one failure like that in 600 rounds for an AK is pretty bad. You know, I have DI AR-15s that have thousands and thousands of rounds and not a single issue. So yeah, that's a little weird. Maybe it's just breaking in. I don't really know. We'll keep an eye on that. That said, though, I love PSA. You know, they took care of me when the issues came up. They're cool folks. I appreciate the price point that this gun is sold at, but at the same time, I shouldn't have had this many issues with the gun this early on. I really shouldn't have. It shouldn't have come up. But I liked shooting the gun. You know, the first time I took it to the range, I liked all of the blast and, you know, the heavier recoil impulse. That was really, really fun. I'd missed shooting AKs. It had been a while, and it was just fun. I loved it. But after a couple of sessions, I started to realize, this gun is really inconvenient. The AK folks, they say this is the superior platform. The AR-15 is unreliable, and the AK is more robust. But the AK is really just kind of inconvenient, isn't it? Everything takes longer. It takes longer to change magazines. It takes longer to run the action. The sights are worse. It's just a worse platform. It's just not as refined. But it's also a lot earlier as well. It's from an entirely different generation of assault rifles. But bolting all this stuff on here, that does narrow that gap. But it doesn't narrow the gap all the way. And that's the reason that I did all this. It was important to see how close could I get this to AR-15 feel and AR-15 times? And the answer is not that close. This thing's still lagging by 20, 30%. The Galil Ace maybe gets a little bit closer. I'm going to try to maybe get one of those down the line and see if that does narrow that gap, but I don't know if it will. So as of right now, I love shooting the AK. I'm really enjoying it, especially with these ergonomic upgrades, but it's purely a fun thing. It reminds me of my love of revolvers. Some days I maybe prefer shooting revolvers to automatics, but compared to like a Glock 19, a revolver sucks. Revolvers are objectively worse by every metric than most semi-automatics in most conditions. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, but compared to semi-automatics, revolvers blow. Also, sorry about my voice. You guys know I've had some surgeries in the past, and some days my voice just sounds a lot worse than it does other days. So testing will continue. Maybe I'll just get faster with the AK, because I'm also not ruling out the idea that I just suck and I haven't learned this platform well enough, because I have not shot it nearly as much as I've shot AR-15. So we have to allow for the idea that I'm just terrible. And we all know I suck at shooting a lot of other things, so maybe I'm just really bad. Anyhow, hopefully we'll get the longer full-length review to you next month, maybe. There's a lot of footage to put together there. You'll see some of this range footage in that video, probably some additional range footage. There's a lot of that to go through as well. But so far, I'm loving the gun. It's worse than an AR-15 in every way. The PSA platform needs some refinement. And I think this is kind of just more of a fun gun. And and I need to also add that PSA has not quite gotten it right with this top cover, have they? That's a lot of play there. And as I shoot the gun more, that's just going to loosen up more and more. It's going to get worse and worse. There will be more vertical play. I don't think that any horizontal play will be introduced, because that hinge is fairly robust, but there's going to be a lot more vertical play. It's just going to get worse. So I'll keep an eye on that. Anyhow, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you for watching this, and I will talk to you soon. Good night.